Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are using the Johnson edition. We turned out a poem 584. It ceased to hurt me, though so slow. Now, the it of this poem, we're going to assume has something to do with pain, sorrow, grief, anguish. She'll mention some version of all of that in this poem. This poem was first published in the Atlantic Monthly of February 1929, but not in totality until the New England Quarterly number 20 of 1947 published it in its entirety. Now, in many ways, we're back to poems that we've already seen. Do you guys remember when we did 241? I like a look of agony, because I know it's true. Men do not sham convulsion or simulate a throe. The eyes glaze once, and that is death, impossible to feign. The beads upon the forehead by homely anguish strung. And then you guys remember just here a little bit ago when we did 574. You'll remember this, the way she says it. My first well day since many ill. I asked to go abroad and take the sunshine in my hands and see the things in pod. A blossom just when I went in to take my chance with pain, uncertain if myself or he should prove the strongest one. The summer deepened while we strove. She put some flowers away and redder-cheeked ones in their stead, a fond, illustrious way. To cheat herself, it seems she tired, as if before a child to fade tomorrow rainbows held a sepulchre could hide. She dealt a fashion to the nut. She tied the hoods to seed. She dropped bright scraps of tint about and left Brazilian threads on every shoulder that she met. Then both her hands of haze put up to hide her parting grace from our unfitted eyes. My loss, my sickness, was it loss or that ethereal gain one earns by measuring the grave, then measuring the sun? Now, our assumptions that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily is our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments where we commented on the fact that in especially 1862, there seems to have been something really difficult that happened for Emily. Maybe physical illness, maybe something else. And out of that time, many of her poems about grieving and pain will be produced. I'm also hopeful that you've already read through our previous 583 poems. We just finished with 583, A Toad Can Die of Light. And if you have, you'll hear the echoes and resonances in a poem like this. I also want to point out, this is not unusual in a number of Emily's poems. She likes to move from the past tense to the present tense, but it seems to only occur when the poems are written in the first person singular, which we'll have here. She says it this way. It ceased to hurt me, though so slow. I could not feel the anguish go, but only knew by looking back that something had benumbed the track. Nor when it altered I could say, for I had worn it every day, as constant as the childish frock I hung upon the peg at night. But not the grief, that nestled close, as needles lady softly pressed to cushions' cheeks to keep their place. Nor what consulted I could trace, except whereas 'twas wilderness, it's better, almost peace. Now, our use of the word almost is like our use of the word perhaps. We've commented that when we get to 696, it'll be acres of perhaps. And I think that when we get to 624, she'll say forever is composed of nows. And when we kind of have that sense that Emily's processing through her anguish, through her grieving, through her pain. Notice she never says what the it actually is, other than obviously pain or suffering. And to that degree, this is another theodicy. That is to say, why must there be pain and suffering in the world? And as we've pointed out so many times, Emily makes that argument that you have to learn how to ask not why did this happen to me, but rather why did this happen for me. That part of her poetic project is to come to terms with why pain and suffering happened for her. Notice, it ceased to hurt me, though so slow. In other words, it took a long time. I think standing behind this poem is Pilgrim's Progress, Bunyan's classic, as well as Dante's Divine Commedia. We've given lectures on both at LearnStrong.net. The idea is that it takes a long time to get through the pain and the suffering. What is it the 23rd Psalm would have said in her 16:11? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. It ceased to hurt me, though so slow. I could not feel the anguish go. Notice anguish is capitalized. And notice the rhyming here. It's almost like she's de-emphasizing the pain with the rhyme, but only knew by looking back that something had benumbed the track. Now, we'll go from track to trace, and I think tracking makes sense with our study of Dante and the Divine Commedia. And notice the use of the word benumbed. Now, she only uses this word one time in all her poetry, and it's here, right? She says, the only way that I really understood the passing of whatever this pain anguish was by virtue of slowly getting out of it and then looking back to a formal time. Again, Dante works rather well. The idea that, or he's always proceeding through, it takes a long time to get to paradise, and he's referencing always back to things he's been through. Notice the construction then from nor to but to nor. Nor when it altered, I could say, for I had worn it every day. Now, is she talking about physical illness or spiritual mental illness? We're not sure. As notice Emily's similes in this poem. She's got a couple of brilliant ones. It's like she had grown so accustomed to the pain and the grieving and the suffering that it was like as constant as the childish frock. Childish will take us back to poem 77, you'll recall. The childish frock I hung upon the peg at night. It's a brilliant word picture. In other words, the little dress or the frock that she wears, she takes it off, she hangs it on the peg, and there it is waiting for her the next morning. Only Emily could liken the kind of grief or anguish that she's dealing with to putting on a dress daily, and after a while you just grow accustomed to wearing it. But, she says, not the grief. So in other words, the pain itself, the anguish itself may be gone, but not the grieving. Which seems to suggest maybe this is something other than a physical torment she's dealing with. The grief that nestled close as, now to our second simile here, as needles. Now, when we get to poem 617, well, we're going to come back to this whole thing of needles. She says it this way, don't put up my thread and needle, I'll begin to sew when the birds begin to whistle, better stitches sew. These were bent, my sight got cooked, when my mind is plain, I'll do seams a queen's endeavor would not blush to own. Hymns too fine for ladies tracing to the sightless knot, tucks of dainty interspersion like a dotted dot. Leave my needle in the furrow where I put it down. I can make the zigzag stitches straight when I am strong. Till then, dreaming I'm sewing. Fetch the seam I miss closer, so I at my sleeping still surmise I stitch. Emily stitching all the time. Here, notice the word picture. The grief was different. It nestled close in what way? As needles, dash, ladies softly pressed to cushions' cheeks, dash, to keep their place. It's a brilliant word picture. And we've seen this idea of the needle and the stitching. We can't help but, of course, think of a Kafka story about it as it comes to mind, right? The idea that the needle of the grieving, the needle of the pain, just like sticking it into a pin cushion. And then finally, from nor to but to nor to finish. Nor, what consoled it, whatever the it is, I could trace. Notice we go from tracking to tracing. Except, whereas 'twas wilderness. And in other words, there's parts of the pain and suffering that she went through that's almost like trying to see the path, but you can't see it because it goes through the dense woods. And of course, where do we start in our study of Dante in the Divine Commedia? But what? Lost in the woods, in the middle of the way, he says, right? Again, full lectures at learnstrong.net for those of you that want to run that to ground. And then finally, she'll come to the end at a present tense moment. Notice, all of this has been in past tense as she's reflected on the pain and the suffering, but now she says, it's better, whatever again the it is. It's better, dash, almost peace, capitalized peace, dash. She loves this word almost. She uses it in 32 of her poems. When we get to the last time she uses it, in 1764, it's a brilliant way, the way she uses almost. I want you guys to be paying attention to it. This is how she uses it for the last time. We'll obviously come back to this poem when we hit 1764. The saddest noise, the sweetest noise, the maddest noise that grows, the birds, they make it in the spring at night's delicious close. Between the March and April line, that magical frontier beyond which summer hesitates, almost too heavenly near. It makes us think of all the dead that sauntered with us here. By separations, sorcery, made cruelly more dear. It makes us think of what we had and what we now deplore. We almost wish those siren throats would go and sing no more. An ear can break a human heart as quickly as a spear. We wish the ear had not a heart so dangerously near. It's a brilliant poem, and her use of almost twice in that poem. We'll come back to it here as well. Okay, what is her message here at 2a? I think the argument that she's making is terrible anguish or pain is often only relieved, if at all, slowly. And I think that's an important message. In other words, she says, you can't expect pain or suffering to go away quickly. And even if the physical pain is gone, this poem seems to suggest the grieving continues. At 2b, we've commented on the movement from the past to the present, and this that construction of nor, but, and nor. And the use of the word benumbing, I think it's a powerful single word. It's the only time she ever used it. At 3a, well, of course, we mentioned Dante. Think about Pilgrim's Progress, the same thing. You've got to go through all of those challenges to be able to get to the end, right? It's a slow process from Inferno to Paradiso. Finally, at 3b, to own a poem like this, what was a time for you that it took a lot of time to overcome a certain level of anguish or pain? Thank you.